Hafaday, good evening. The Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were provided to the media. First notice on Tuesday, August 8, 2018. Second notice on Friday, August 10th, 2018. For the record, today is Tuesday, August 14, 2018, and the time now was 5:10 p.m. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following. Bill 57-34, which is relative to establishing a community paramedic and community paramedic outreach program. Bill 291-34, relative to allowing individuals to change the legal sex designation on their birth certificates. Bill 302-34, relative to permitting the home cultivation of medicinal cannabis under certain conditions. Bill 319-34, relative to the annual deposit into the Guam Visitors Bureau Rainy Day Fund. Bill 320-34, relative to providing civil immunity to athletic coaches, managers, and officials. Bill 326, relative to granting waiver authority to the Governor of Guam for certain requirements related to the laboratories and dispensaries, as those requirements are set out in the Joaquin Casey Concepcion II Compassionate Cannabis Use Act of 2013. And the last bill is Bill 327. This is relative to eliminating the requirement of 51% local ownership in the medicinal cannabis testing laboratory. We also have the executive appointments of Dr. Vincent S. Duenas as a member of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners, Dr. Ryan Claros as a physical therapist representative on the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, and Melissa Chargualaf as a member of the Guam Behavioral Health Wellness Center Advisory Council. We'll start with the nominees, the appointments this evening. I want to thank my colleagues who are here with me. Senator Jim Espadon, thank you very much, Senator. Senator Talina Nelson, thank you, Senator. And Senator Luis Muñoz for being here. We'll start off with the nomination of Ms. Melissa Chargualaf. And so those that wish to provide oral testimony, I will call your name, and if you can join us up here in front. And those of you who wish to provide any written testimony may do so by submitting it tonight or sending it to my office so we can include it on record. I'd like to invite Dr. Lisa Baza, Mayfei Muco, and Mr. Ray Vega. Well, we can start, or
is this on,
Dr.
right?
Lisa? Yes.
Hi, good evening. Hafaday, it is with great pleasure that I recommend Missy Chargualaf to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center Advisory Council. The council serves a very important role. They are charged with determining programmatic needs, prioritizing those needs, measuring the quality and appropriateness of services, among other mandates. The council is tasked to set the agenda on how we treat members of our community who suffer from mental health issues. Mental illness does not discriminate. It affects the rich and poor, the manumku and the manhobin, those employed and those who cannot work anymore, the person with a disability and the one without. It affects those marginalized and living in the fringes of society. Mental illness undermines the welfare of our island and people. It places an enormous strain on public services and has costs we will never recover from. Today, we are plagued with a fiscal crisis, a tanked economy, and it may not be the best time to say that mental health should be a priority. However, mental health is a cradle-to-grave problem with nothing like a cradle-to-grave service. Missy's extensive experience in the behavioral health field, coupled with her dual master's degrees in psychology and public admin, provides the balance needed in this advisory council. She has the primary experience and knowledge of providing behavioral health services to marginalized populations. Missy understands the challenges of accessing quality services. Additionally, she has the public administration background that involves policy and analysis and program evaluation that complements her knowledge and experience. Missy served as a member of the Guam Board of Social Work and was instrumental in drafting their policies and procedures for licensure. She was a member of the Guam Coalition of Domestic and Sexual Violence, whose work is immeasurable in providing community outreach and education services. Missy also served as our board president for the Guam Association of Individual Marriage and Family Therapists. It was under her leadership that the association engaged the community in behavioral health and emotional wellness events. In conclusion, I believe that Missy will contribute greatly to this council. She has the energy and commitment to ensuring the best interest of our community is represented by her appointment to the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center Advisory Council. Sizus Masi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maza. Ms. Mayfei?
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Mayfei Moiko, and I'm going to give an oral recommendation for Ms. Missy Chargualaf to be part of the Guam Wellness, the Guam Advisory Board. As a board member for the Guam Social Work Board, coming into the board and program and documentation that was prepared for our team was well prepared, and it was my understanding that Ms. Chargualaf worked tremendously in creating the rules and regulation, as well as working with our other members and other staff. Aside from being the board member at the Guam Social Work Board and all the things she's done for us to make our social work board work better, I've also worked with her in a professional manner as a social service supervisor for Child Protective Services and client services, working together hand in hand. She is able to work with us, and she works great with all the other individuals in that capacity.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you. Mr. Vega?
Good afternoon, Senator. Senator Dennis Rodriguez, Committee Chair for the Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizen, and member of this committee, Senator Agon, Senator Muña, Senator Espaldon, and Senator Nelson. Before I proceed with my testimony, I just want to express my appreciation for my oversight committee's support for Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, including the budget. Thank you very much. My name is Ray Vega, and I'm currently the director for Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center. Thank you for this opportunity to express my support on the nomination of Ms. Melissa Chargualaf as member of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center Advisory Council, and I humbly ask for your support and approval. Although I don't know Ms. Chargualaf personally, her wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience matters the most. As we all know, the approach to mental illness and behavioral health issues are changing significantly, most especially for those individuals who are involved with the legal system. And this is where the expertise of Ms. Chargualaf comes in. Ms. Chargualaf will bring to Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center a different, new perspective on the approaches in the delivery of care from the court's point of view. Her current scope of work as a senior judicial therapist and years of experience in the judicial system will be a perfect fit for Guam Behavioral Health and could provide guidance to the management and staff as well as we deal with clients that are involved with the legal system. This is surely a significant factor as Guam Behavioral Health is heavily involved within the court system. Mental health court, drug court included juvenile cases for children and young adults. Her resume speaks for itself. Very few are willing and committed to do community work, community service for Guam, and I respectfully thank Ms. Chargualaf for her willingness to share her knowledge and experience to Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center and the people of Guam. I support her nomination, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vega, for your testimony. Senators have any questions for Mr. Vega? No? Okay, thank you. I want to recognize Vice Speaker Terlahi and Senator Uggan. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Vega. Is there anyone else that wishes to provide any testimony for Melissa Chargualaf? If not, then I'll call Ms. Chargualaf.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson and members of the Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens. Before I begin, I would first like to start by thanking the Governor for having the confidence in me and nominating me to serve again for a second time during his administration on another board. And I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to be here to humbly ask for your vote to support me in serving. It is a privilege to be able to tell you about my background and how I have come to this point in my career. I come from a lineage of public servants. My grandparents on both the Casil side and the Burlett side. My parents, Evelyn and Leo Casil, who modeled and were really the biggest influencers in my life in regards to being active in the community. Giving back has been instilled in me, and I hope that I will be able to do the same for my daughter, Hannah. I have been working in the behavioral health field as a practicing marriage and family therapist for the past 13 years. My practice started in the judiciary of Guam, and I continued that work outside when I worked for the Guam National Guard, and I've worked at Dodea up at Guam High School for a bit. I returned to the judiciary, and I am now there as a senior judicial therapist. It was 2 years ago, approximately, that the Judiciary of Guam and the University of Guam partnered for a pilot program that would allow for full-time working court employees to earn a master's degree in public administration. I'm a very proud graduate of that program. I learned so much about myself and about the business of public administration. It was at this time that I made a connection to the meaning of being a public servant. What I gained from my experience was powerful and meaningful, and I have a sense of direction and a deep respect for the work and those who choose to devote their lives to that work. I feel that I am a better employee. I have a greater appreciation for the work environment, the challenges that affect the different components from all branches of government coexisting and working together. Most importantly, a heartfelt sense of pride and deeper meaning that directs me towards a purpose. My perspective comes from being a direct service provider, and the advantage of being in the trenches allows for me to contribute in many different ways. I have discovered that what helps me do my day job is to be able to commit myself to volunteering, my time to various organizations in the community. It brings passion and motivation for me to continue to find that next project. My volunteer work has afforded me the opportunity to work with organizations that support other professionals who are associated with direct service providers. I have worked for many years with the Association of Individual Marriage and Family Therapists of Guam, the Guam Coalition Against Family Violence and Sexual Assault, and most recently I served on the Guam Board of Social Workers. Yes, this is a short list and it's purposeful. And that is because I devote my time, my energy, and my efforts to the commitment that I made to be of the best service that I can possibly be. And with that, I pledge my commitment to serving on this council, utilizing my best efforts, energy, and knowledge. I am hopeful that you will all allow for me to expand my knowledge base, have another perspective, and allow for me the opportunity to continue to give back to the community. I would like to thank you for your time and attention, and I appreciate your listening to me and for allowing me to be able to humbly ask for your vote of confidence to serve. Thank you. Si Diyos maasi, and maraming salamat po.
Great. Si Diyos maasi, and maraming salamat po to you too. I want to congratulate you again for being appointed to this council. It was an honor for me to also hear your confirmation on the social work board. And so I know that you guys are working very hard with that board. And so congratulations. I have some questions, but I'll ask any of my other my colleagues have any questions for you. Okay. Vice Speaker Terlahi, you have any questions? Senator Esteves, thank you for joining the Vice Chairman of the committee. Senator Espadon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chargualaf, again, thank you for accepting the nomination. It's a volunteer job, in essence, if you weren't nominated, and it will require a lot of your time and efforts, and you've spoken to that well, that you definitely feel the passion and you feel the need to share yourself in this capacity. I'm just interested. I'm looking at your background, and you have a degree, a bachelor's degree in international studies, and you also have a master's degree in public administration. And just point of information, how do we get down to where you are today in terms of doing a lot of social work issues and dealing with behavioral wealth issues, and then also on top of it serving, I believe, at the court as a senior judicial therapist? What happened along the way from your background, your educational background, to really now your real life work, what you're doing?
Oh.
How did you get there?
Thank you for that question, and I'm happy to answer that for you. I have a BA in international studies because I wanted to go to law school. And after I graduated with my BA, my life just kind of took a different direction, mainly because my dad said, come home and work. And so I did. And in the course of gaining work experience, because you know that that's like one of the most valuable things to have is work experience. I was able to work for the legislature, and it was there that really kind of just catapulted me into having some kind of, it kind of lit the fire, so to speak. And from there, I actually got accepted to go to UOG in their counseling program.
Oh, okay.
However, life happens, and I moved back to Honolulu, Hawaii, and it was there that I pursued my master's degree, because I've always wanted to go back, and then I knew, because I worked here as a staff assistant for Simon Sanchez. I was a staff assistant for the Guam, at the time it was referred to as Guam, not Guam Behavioral Health, but mental health. And so that's kind of like how it all happened. So I lived away, and then when I was moving back to Guam, I met with my clinical supervisor, who at the time was Dr. Jim Kiffer, which I think we all remember him, right? And my boss now, my administrator, Regina Yasuhiro, offered me an opportunity to work towards my license.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that, because like I said, based upon your educational background, you weren't geared towards the social work or behavioral health and things like that. I mean, it can be argued. And I just found it interesting that here you are now, and I guess your life experiences have brought this have brought you to this point where now you can contribute in this specialized field, because this isn't just for anybody when you start talking about behavioral health.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I believe with the court, you're the, what's the title of that one?
I am a senior judicial therapist.
Senior judicial therapist.
Yes.
Having worked for the court, I understand what you do. So I appreciate it, and I do appreciate you stepping up to the nomination, not turning down the nomination, and actually saying that you're willing to go for it on this one. You have my full support.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Nelson?
Buenas and half a day, Ms. Chargualaf. I want to thank you for your continued desire to serve our community. I had an opportunity to work alongside you at the Guam National Guard and the great work that you've done there. I have no questions. You know, we spent some time together talking while you were working there, so I believe you're the right woman for the job, and best of luck, and you have my support on your nomination. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chair,
Senator. Yes.
if I may, just one, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask one thing that I was actually interested in also. I'm looking at your packet. The DREAM Project. What is the DREAM Project? It looks like it's with the Judiciary of Guam and the University of Guam Capstone Project. What
Yes.
exactly was the DREAM Project, or is the DREAM Project?
So the DREAM Project was the brainchild of our cohort's efforts to, in lieu of doing a thesis, we worked on the Capstone Project. So basically what it was that my cohort, we identified gaps in regards to communications, in education. The goal was to create a curriculum that would allow for anybody who had access to the internet, and also to teachers, education partners, and so forth, to be able to have information in regards to educating them about what the court was, the processes. So it was a very intense time, and the pilot program that we participated in was accelerated. So usually graduates with master's degrees in public administration, they have 2 years. Well, we had months. So it was really intense, and that is, what you see if you go to our website. We have the information, the resources available.
Okay.
So we worked with different community partners to be able to create something like that, and we really tried very hard to get notice to, like, this exists, and this is the fruits of our labor.
All right.
So we're very proud of our project.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was just as interested. I saw this, and it kind of stood out, the DREAM Project. But thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Muñoz?
Thank you, Ms. Chargualaf. I just wanted to thank you. I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you for stepping up and accepting the nomination.
Thank you.
Your work is very important. I think lately there have been so many tragedies that involve behavioral health and wellness, and I think that it requires special people to do this job. And your calm demeanor it exudes social work. So I just want to thank you for that, and you come from good genes. So thank you for stepping up to the plate, and I look forward to your confirmation.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Agustin? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to extend my appreciation for you stepping up and extending your services to our island, to our community. Just knowing exactly what the challenges are out there in our community affecting our people, and recognizing that behavioral health and direct treatment, the requirement and the need for that type of service, especially in today's environment, is really, really high. So can I ask you, from your perspective, what do you see as the biggest challenges in your field of therapy and counseling that you provide, that we as leaders in this community need to provide additional support? Because we recognize some of the needs, but we need to hear it directly from you who actually work with our people and provide the service.
Right. Well, thank you for that question, Senator. One of the first things that comes to my mind is actually supporting initiatives and supporting self-care. I think that one of the biggest things that we forget when we're working, I think in any industry or profession, is that we have to really kind of pay attention to ourselves and take care of ourselves. And with that, I think that it offers support to employees and other people that we work for. When you take care of yourself and you take care of the people that you work for, they take care of the organization that you represent. I'm a big believer in that. Second, again, is really just supporting, educating yourselves about the different ways that our community is just overwhelmed in regards to the resources. I know we just finished the budget talks and everybody's asking for money. And so one of the things that I believe would be is just education. Know that like there's some presenting problems that sometimes don't even come before you, but indirectly affect each and every part of our existence and how we cohabitate together. And just support from the top. If it's one thing that I've learned is when you have that kind of support, so when each and every one of you commit and support initiatives for mental health care, emotional well-being, just know that even something as you might think as small as that is really kind of inspiring to someone like me who works for you, in the community, providing services, and just more money.
I know, and I appreciate you recognizing that the government is overwhelmed with the request for resources, but we have to find a way to get the resources to where it needs to go.
Yes.
Because our people who are affected mentally or with a certain kind of treatment, whether it's drug rehabilitation or whatever the case may be, we need to help them, give them a hand up so that eventually they will get back into society and be direct, positive contributors, rather than it spreading and affecting other family members and the rest of the community. And you provide a critical service to our community, and also your peers and your colleagues do. It's just being able to make sure that we recognize that and we continue to apply the resources where it needs to go. So, but I appreciate it, and best wishes in your service to our people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chargualaf. I see here, and I'm very happy to see your work experience serving as a MIFLIC in various capacities. And I think it's really important moving forward, especially with the demographic that we have on the island with regard to military families. Now, just one question. So this budget cycle, if approved, we did provide for funding for an in-residential treatment capacity, whether through private partnerships or internally. I would like to just hear from you, I think, where, based on your advice, where you would like to see Guam Behavioral Health go, go with that financing, and what you would like to see the residential treatment center turn into in terms of services to the community. And specifically, also, if you can elaborate a little further onto how you could see it growing with the necessity of veterans who often have to go off island for treatment.
Thank you for that question, Senator. So my vision of where the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center is operating, when we do like in this capacity, I think that what I see is this organization that offers the full services and expertise in regards to providing services. I would just love to pick up the phone and be able to call someone there and say, I have a client that I'm working with, and can you do this for me? And the answer would be yes. But as you know, that's not nearly as close to something like that. And having to make do with what we do have in regards to resources is something that we just kind of do. It's a practice that I'm hoping that we would be able to put and have that confidence in Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center to be able to have it be that one-stop place. But you know, there's a lot of work, and there's this issues with recruitment and finding folks who will work for, I mean, not as much as their mainland counterparts. But I believe that you can find people. I believe that you can look at this organization and identify just other means in ways that is motivated and that that suits them, so then that it actually, the organization fits our needs in the behavioral health community. In regards to veterans, I'm a big supporter of veterans' health. I enjoy having the opportunity to have a conversation in regards to providing services, and as you know, I don't particularly work in the Veterans Court at the judiciary, but my support is just always there. There's always this place in my heart for service members, and how I've learned how much they have to each, and not only the service member, but the family support. And a lot of my ideas have flourished, and that's why I think that when you have the support from these different elements, it just kind of takes its place and rises. So I hope that answers your questions.
And it does, and I think, I'm really happy that the courage to step up to this nomination. It's very much appreciated, I think, is the common sentiment amongst the panel. And just to, I guess, leave with one thought. I mean, with that in mind, and residential treatment and veterans, and most importantly, the families that have to endure the issues and the treatment that veterans have to go through. I've always kind of pushed this issue, and I think with the expanded resources being provided to behavioral health, I just want to put in the back of your mind to kind of keep that avenue open and look for creative opportunities with Veterans Affairs in terms of expanding that residential treatment program for the veterans. And because, as you know, basically any veteran that needs any type of inpatient or residential treatment has to go off island. And the detriment that has to the family and the undue hardship, I mean, oftentimes, as you're well aware, yes. I mean, working as a MIFLIC, oftentimes service members don't want to talk to anybody and don't want to utilize those services that are available, only because of the additional difficulties it would present to them. So I would just encourage that you have that in the back of your mind as an option moving forward into the future. And I thank you again for accepting the nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Vice Speaker.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank you also for your agreeing to serve on this position. It's interesting to me and maybe very good that you are also a therapist at the court, a senior therapist even, yes. Because the court in-house client services really evolved from mental health being not equipped at that time to handle what the court needed. But of course, our goal, I think, for the whole community is to make sure that behavioral health department is able to service the entire community without them having to get into the court system to get those types of services and to get them promptly, right? And it's that timing that I know you understand is very important. So I'm just going to ask you, this is an advisory council, and I know you're working with some very good people, but you be assertive, because we never know how much time we have on these things, and be assertive and make the changes that you really see from your experience working in the trenches, as you said, make those changes as quickly as you can and bring them to our attention. You are going to be confirmed, it looks like, for 3 years.
Yes.
And don't let the next confirmation be the next time we hear from you. If there's something that you think can move this faster, then please bring it to our attention. We're happy to help. And thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Vice Speaker. You know, my question, you've answered some of them in some of the other questions that were asked. I was going to ask you about the Guam Board of Social Work. I know that you guys are working through some of the challenges there, right? But I guess we can save that because you're not being appointed for that board, so we can save it for discussion offline. So again, is there anyone else who wishes to provide any oral testimony? If not, we're completed with your confirmation hearing. I want to thank you and congratulate you, and the committee will work to get your committee report together and report it out for the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
I want to thank your parents and your daughter as well, right? It's your daughter who's here? Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next individual, Dr. Vincent Duenas. Is there anyone that wishes to testify in support of Dr. Duenas? If not, I'll call Dr. Duenas to the front. Thank you very much, Dr. Duenas. Dr. Duenas being appointed to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. And so, Doc, we'll go ahead and start with your testimony.
Hafa Senators. Some of you I know already, but for those who don't, my name is Dr. Vinny Duenas. I'm an internal medicine physician practicing here on Guam. Since my return in 2013, I've worked in a variety of clinical settings, both inpatient and outpatient. I am also an active member in the community, volunteering for the mobile medical clinic with Senator Rodriguez. I also run a nonprofit for autism, Hunter Speaks organization, as well as serve as a preceptor for pre-medical students under the HOME program. I just want to say that I am honored to have been nominated for such a position. I think as board members who are responsible for credentialing active and future practicing physicians here on island, we are partially and indirectly responsible for the type and standard of care that is given to our island's people. So it is a job that I will take very seriously.
Thank you very much, Doc. Vice Speaker, we'll start with you. Senator Espadon.
No real questions. Again, thank you for stepping up to the plate. I was just observing, you know, the nominee before you and then yourself coming up, and I know Mr. Claros coming up behind you. It seems like there's a changing of the guard in terms of people coming in and assisting the government move forward. Right. And so I want to acknowledge that, and that our people are coming back and are serving, are willing to serve in the capacities that you're volunteering or you're accepting. And so I believe all of us have to appreciate that. So definitely, I have no questions. I just want to thank you for stepping up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question, and it's more just to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts with regards to temporary certification or sponsorship programs for traveling physicians to the island?
I mean, I think I'm a huge supporter of that. As a practitioner in internal medicine, both in the clinic setting and at GMH, we have seen a huge shortage in subspecialty care. I think that having practicing physicians, especially subspecialists, would benefit our people tremendously. We send a lot of our patients to the PI for this type of care, and it's hard for a lot of our patients to make that trip, both financially and physically. We see a lot of patients with chronic disease, and so to have the opportunity for specialists to come in and treat them here would be a huge help.
Well, I appreciate that answer, Dr. Duenas. That's actually exactly what I was looking to hear. I think we're in agreement. There are very large shortages of subspecialists, and I think the traveler sponsorship program with the traveling physicians is a great way to currently is a great way to try to alleviate that. So I'm really glad to hear that answer. I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for accepting the nomination.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Muñoz.
Once again, no questions, but I do want to say thank you for accepting the nominations. You definitely have all the credentials to be a part of this board, but I can still read your writing, so you might need to work on that. But thank you so much for stepping up to the plate.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Agustin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Dr. Duenas, thank you for extending yourself to the community. We know that there are always going to be challenges within the medical profession, especially in light of the shortage nationwide. But let me ask you, in terms of looking at Guam and what we provide and what we have available in terms of facilities, in terms of trying to entice specialists, you have any ideas as to how we can address some of the specialist requirements? I know there have been programs that have been administered in the past where a particular heart specialist would come out twice a year and tend to some critical patients here on island. So do you have any ideas as to how we can entice some of these specialists to at least come to Guam rather than our people having to incur that extensive or tremendous costs in receiving services off island?
I think, when I first came back in 2013, GMH was my first job here, and I was shocked coming out of Arizona to be a hospitalist as my first job out of residency. But 2018, I'm still a hospitalist at GMH, and there has been tremendous growth in the hospital, thanks to Dr. Larry Lazam and his team. He has been able to recruit a lot of people out here, and not only recruit them out here, but retain them here. And so our cardiology service is getting a lot better. Our neurointerventional radiology service is getting better. I think we've made a lot of progress at the hospital. Obviously, the biggest challenge is financial. A lot of these specialists expect to get paid a certain amount of money, and it's not easy for them to come back. Even for our local graduates who are out in the mainland, people with these type of specialties who are from here still can't come out here because they're burdened with huge student debt and they can't afford to come back. And that's the sad thing. There's lots of Guam doctors out there that we just don't hear of. And I think if we could come up with some way to entice them back home through some sort of program to help maybe with student loans or something like that, it would help a lot. As a primary care physician, we face a lot of challenges because we know what type of care our patients need, and we can't get that to them a lot of the times. And so it's frustrating as a practitioner to not be able to have certain services to give to our patients.
Well, let me just close with this statement. You're relatively young, so you have an extensive career ahead of you, and I certainly hope that with your insight that we'll be able to continue to progress in terms of providing the best medical services that we possibly can to the entire island community as well as to the region. So thank you again for your service.
Definitely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think, like Senator Espadon said, a lot of the younger docs are coming back, and we're bringing back with us knowledge that I think will benefit the island. Dr. Felix Cabrera, who's now heading up Guam Regional Medical City, has his challenges up there, but I think there's a lot of momentum growing for healthcare here on island. So it's exciting to be a part of it all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Nelson, do you have any comments or questions?
No, half a day, Dr. Duenas. I just wanted to say thank you for accepting this appointment and all the work you've done within the community and bringing awareness to autism. Thank you for the strides that you also made in ensuring that there's a way forward, including those that are interested in helping those and assisting those with autism. You provided an educational path for them. So thank you for them, and I commend you on your work, and you have my support for your nomination.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Dr. Duenas, congratulations on your appointment to the Guam Board of Medical Examiners. This is really one of the very important boards and commissions. And so I'm very happy when I saw your name. I didn't know which Vince Duenas, because there's another Dr. Vincent Duenas.
Yeah.
And so when I looked at it and I saw it was you, I was very happy, because I know that we share a lot of the same things that we see for Guam in healthcare. I want to thank you. I want to recognize your wife, Tanya, for also being very active in our community with the organization Hunter Speaks, and what you guys are doing to really bring autism to the next level here on Guam. So I want to thank you for that. Just something to add with what Senator Esteves talked about the traveling physicians, right? I know that we passed a law that you were supportive of as well, which was to permit foreign-based physicians, and doing it under very strict guidelines, with the local physician here being able to kind of sponsor that physician. I know that there was resistance from some members of the board, but with you coming on board, I feel very, very hopeful that we can see some of these things move forward. Because really, what that law was about was to enable physicians to come here to Guam to treat the indigent, and it was not for them to be able to bill or make money here. It's just to be able to bring specialists we don't have here to treat our people. So I'm really looking forward to you helping us move that through in the board once you're confirmed.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you very much, Senator.
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. One last question. I think all things being equal, Dr. Duenas, and with consideration to the position on the credentialing process of local providers, and I don't want to ask you very generally, so I'll try to ask very plainly and to the point. Do you believe that providers, credentialed providers on the island, have anything to fear with recommendations or with regards to their credentials, specifically as you would be reviewing them? Would they have anything to fear with recommendations for medicinal cannabis use?
In terms of certifying?
Of certifying. So would their certifications put them at any kind of risk, in your opinion, to their credentialing?
I don't believe so. I mean, just like the U.S. Supreme Court case, Condon versus McCaffrey. I mean, physicians are legally allowed to certify. We just can't prescribe. I do think that the current Form 2A that is listed under public health forms does put certain physicians at a liability, because it specifically states in the form that medicinal cannabis, it talks, I don't remember the exact wording, but it does talk about risk benefit in that form, and because we don't have a lot of medical studies, that may make a lot of physicians feel uncomfortable to certify using that specific form. So I think if moving forward with the medical cannabis program, I think that's something that should be looked at. I personally am a supporter of medical cannabis on Guam. I do believe that we need to look at alternative options to healthcare here. And traditionally, we've been kind of guided to always resort to big pharma, and it's not always the best option for all patients. And so I'm excited that this program is coming to fruition, and so that's the one thing I would probably work on in the next coming weeks or months.
Thank you, Dr. Duenas, and just three phrases I'd like to share based on your response: refreshing, honest, and well said. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I just want to add, after hearing your statement on medical cannabis, I looked over at Andrea and saw her smile, because it's difficult to be able to get physicians to come on board. But hearing it from you and knowing that you'll be joining the licensing board, it's really very, very refreshing to know that you have that open mind, and that you'll be able to bring perspective into that board. So I'm going to try to get your committee report out immediately, so that for the next session we can vote on it. Okay? Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you.
And please say hi to Hunter for us.
Yes.
Thank you. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is I'm sorry. Yes. Are you going to testify on his appointment? Yes. Okay, if you're testifying on his appointment, you can have a seat and testify on his appointment.
Well, it has to do with the good doctor, but it also has to do, since Senator Esteves and you all broached the subject of medical cannabis, and you're on the commission, correct?
Mr. Fest, if it's we can address your concerns during the testimony on the other bills.
No, this has nothing to do with the bills. This has to do with his
so go
appointment.
ahead and testify on Dr. Duenas' appointment.
Well, it has. I asked you a direct question. You're on the commission, correct?
I am, but that's the last question you'll ask of this panel. So please go ahead and testify on Dr. Duenas'.
Okay. Well, I am in support of the doctor, but where I was trying to go is there, as far as my knowledge goes, there's still seats open for positions on the commission, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I suggest or encourage you to encourage the doctor to see if he would like to fill one of those seats. That's all.
Thank you. And just to be clear, that the chairman, as a member of the commission, is not the appointing authority to that commission. It'll be the governor of Guam.
Who is the chairman?
It'll be the governor of Guam who would make that appointment.
Yeah, I know, but you can put in a good word if he would be interested. I don't know, but
well noted, sir. Thank you. We got it. Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you. We'll now move on to Dr. Ryan Claros. Doc. Are there anyone here who wish to testify on behalf of or for Dr. Claros? If not, we'll go ahead and take you on, sir. Dr. Claros is being appointed as a physical therapist representative on the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners.
Good. Can you hear me? Okay. Happy day and good evening, Chairman Rodriguez and the members of the Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens. It's an honor to appear before you today as you consider my nomination as a physical therapist member of the Guam Board of Allied Health. I am humbled by your vote of confidence and look forward to continuing working with my colleagues on this board to help raise Guam standards for healthcare. This is not only a moment of personal achievement for myself, but it is also a deep responsibility. I hope that you know that I will not take this role lightly. In my capacity as a member of the Guam Board of Allied Health, I have served with a passion and humility in a way that supports the mission, goals, and policies of this board. I hope my experience tells of the commitment that I have for this island. Rest assured that I will continue to work to ensure the people of Guam are provided with a level of care and commitment from their healthcare practitioners that they deserve. Thank you again for considering me for this role, and thank you to the Honorable Eddie Wazacalvo for your trust and confidence in my ability to continue to serve on this board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. Vice Speaker, do you have a question or comment?
Just want to say thank you. And this is a repeat appointment for you? All right. And so thank you very much for your service, Dr. Claros. And has there been any issue that has, I don't know, concerned you about your service on the board?
Actually, the board has, obviously it has its ups and downs. I think every member has something to bring, so it's always resolved within the board, so I don't think we have any problems.
All right, and you think the policies that you have to implement are okay so far? No need for change?
I think that within the board there's a lot of policies that we have to make for every specific subspecialty, but I mean it's a process just like anything else, so it's going to take a little bit of time.
All right. Well, thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you.
Senator Esteves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess it just goes without saying. I mean, Dr. Claros is well known in the community for what he does. I think he's really speaks to what we look for in board members, regarding public policy. And again, the record speaks for itself. So again, thank you for your service, and very hopeful and grateful for your continued service to the island in serving this position and capacity. So thank you, Dr. Claros.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Spadon.
Doc, again, you've heard it in the previous when I was addressing Dr. Duenas. I'm just thrilled that we have our own residents coming back and staying here and serving in this community. And I thank you, I congratulate you, and you definitely have my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Hafaday, Dr. Claros. It's good
Hafaday.
to see you. I want to thank you for your commitment to continue to serve. In the past legislatures, we have been working to implement massage certification, and we've been looking for the Guam Allied Board Health to kind of assist us in this area. So I hope that we'd be able to work together with the board and see where we can go from there. Thank you.
Most definitely. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Nelson. Again, I want to congratulate you and thank you for your service to the board. I know this is your reappointment to the board, right? And so aside from the work that you do in the board, I want to thank you also for what you provide to the community with custom fitness. You made a lot of people healthy and work very hard there, so thank you very much. I want to thank your family also for being here and being very supportive of you as well. Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, and we're going to kind of shuffle this around a little bit, request that was made. We'll hear Bill 320-34 first, and for those of you who wish to testify, we have Mr. Bill Bennett, Micah Paulino, Rick Blas, Joey Miranda, Marvin Iseki, and Mr. Rodney Webb. And if you check mark just a written testimony, then you can just provide that to us here. Yes, yes, sorry. Before we move on, we'll have the sponsor of the legislation, Senator Espadon, give us a summary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Bill 320-34 COR seeks to add a new item to the Guam Code relative to providing civil immunity to athletic coaches, managers, and officials. As you know, our island has a very active sports scene, and this can be attributed in no small part to the enthusiastic participation of various members of our community, including parents who are actively involved in their children's sports activities. Whether acting as coaches, sports officials, managers, or referees, these people often work on a purely volunteer basis with nominal or no compensation. However, because of the nature of sports, they may find themselves facing lawsuits arising from actions in sporting activities like sports-related injuries and, for example, liability insurance is generally not available to amateur or volunteer athletic coaches, managers, or officials, or if available at all, only at a very prohibitive cost. And as such, the possibility of a civil liability may deter athletic coaches and sports officials from rendering their important service to the people of Guam. The mere threat of a lawsuit may already be enough to deter people from participating in sports activities, and this directly affects the ability of villages to successfully hold amateur athletic programs. Bill 320 seeks to remedy this by providing civil immunity to athletic coaches, managers, and officials. Specifically, Bill 320 provides that a person who provides services as an athletic coach, a manager, or sports official for the benefit of a nonprofit sports organization or nonprofit sports activity shall not be civilly liable for damages to an athletic participant, coach, manager, or sports official for acts or omissions that occur during the rendering of services in the normal course of the sport. I would like to assure, however, that in no way does this bill condone any act of negligence. Under this bill, no athletic coach, manager, or official will be granted immunity from civil damages due to wanton or grossly negligent acts. So in closing, I would like to basically put in that really the impetus for this bill is that we're seeing a lot of parents stepping up now to the plate to really be active in the lives of their children, to really participate in the sports that they're involved with, and whether it be in a coaching capacity, or refereeing capacity, or managing capacity. But again, we just want to make sure that that is encouraged as opposed to discouraged. This is not because of anything that's happened lately. This is more as a preventative measure looking forward, that parents and others who may want to participate in youth activities will not be civilly liable for ordinary injuries that happen during the course of the sport. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Espadon. Sir, we'll go ahead and start with you, Mr. Bennett.
There. Is it working? Good evening, Senators. My name is Bill Bennett. I'm a full-time resident of Guam. I'm here today as an athlete, a baseball, softball instructor, a game official representing Guam Amateur Baseball Association, Guam Baseball Softball Academy, Guam Pony Baseball and Softball. I'm in support of Bill 320-34 relative to providing civil immunity to athletes, coaches, managers, and officials for the benefit of nonprofit sports organizations or sports activity. I'll start my testimony with a question. Should a sports coach or official be held personally liable when his athlete is injured, bruised, falls ill, or dies while participating in an athletic event? Throughout the history of American athletics, the coach has filled a special role for the individual athlete and team. A coach is responsible for organizing, directing, motivating athletes to perform to their maximum potential while having fun. Here on Guam, volunteer coaches and officials provide positive influences in the sports community are most important by contributing substantially to the welfare, positive lifestyle, and the health to the people of Guam. The bottom line is that we should always keep in mind the reason that these sports people volunteer in the first place: for the growth of youth, for the growth of young adults, and for the love of the sport. In many families, we hear a lot of discussions. Maybe this year I will coach the your middle school softball team. Or, Dad, can you help with our dance team? Over the years, we've been asked to volunteer our time and our experience and work with young athletes in a sports team or sports activity. However, you have to think clearly before you say yes. Consider the potential hazards. You're coaching a pony baseball team when your starting pitcher strikes an opponent batter in the face with a pitch. Or a 10-year-old player is struck in the eye just playing catch with his teammate. More extreme examples include a child being stung by boonie bees while at the field, 2 boys colliding on the basketball court chasing a loose ball, or a grandparent being struck on the sidelines by a flying soccer ball. Most likely, all of these mishaps involve situations where unpaid coaches, officials, volunteers, or working for a nonprofit group could be named as a defendant in a lawsuit. Because children are involved, the law does not allow annulment of duties simply because the coach is a volunteer and not paid. The parents of the injured player alleges that the coaches were negligent in their supervision of the duties and the coaches failed to provide proper training and instruction. The parents cite negligence on the part of the coaches. Did the coaches act with willful, wanton neglect and reckless disregard for the safety of the player? Often courts apply negligent principles in solving these lawsuits. The courts try to determine the amount of negligence required to impose liability is most often the issue. The amount of negligence required varies from simple negligence to gross negligence to willful, wanton, and reckless conduct. While professional coaches in major organizations, sports, are shielded by collective bargaining agreements and workers' compensation statutes, volunteer coaches at the high school, college, and youth sports levels do not enjoy the same kind of protection. Possible lawsuits against these coaches and for sports-related injuries are predicated upon the theory of negligence. The possibility of civil liability may deter athletic coaches and sports officials from volunteering services, assistance to athletic programs. Therefore, in return for their services, immunity from civil liability ought to be provided for such persons. It is my intention that my testimony today will assist the Guam legislature to understand that many to most adult athletic parent coaches and sports officials in Guam frequently volunteer, work for no compensation. Many volunteers work for the benefit of a nonprofit organization providing many forms of sports activities, for the Guam community. The Guam legislature should find that these athletic coaches and sports officials have immunity from civil damages as outlined in Bill 320-34. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your testimony. Mr. Iseki?
Good evening, Senators, Chairman Dennis Rodriguez, Esteves, Talahi, Nelson, and Espeldon. My name is Marvin Ike Izaki, commonly known as Ike. I have here on behalf of our soccer federation. We've been established since 1985, and I've been in the soccer organization called Wings Football, and I've been involved with them for 14 years. My whole mission and our club's mission is to develop the youth of Guam. To protect the development of the youth of Guam, our society is constantly changing. Our community attitudes are changing. This bill, 320-34, is very important. Sometimes organizations that calls nonprofit may not be structurally organized, and sometimes they put themselves into jeopardy. Organizations that are nonprofit and licensed properly, and they have a structure in place, they have rules in place, they have liability waivers in place to try to protect all the coaches that receive sometimes a stipend, sometimes it's just a donation, sometimes it's all free. It's our kids is what's important. If we can continue to develop our children and give them the right tools, the right attitude, to make them good community leaders, to teach them how to respect and give back to the community. That's the strength that we need to have behind the coaches, because they volunteer their time. The soccer federation that we belong under, which is Guam Football Association, if you go up to Harmon Dedado, it's a field that we're all proud of. We've watched that field develop from when it was just nothing but boondocks and grass, but we're proud of it. All the soccer federations that are part of this organization are very proud. Also, the visitors that come in to participate with friendly tournaments coming from Saipan, Korea, Japan, they're all amazed and surprised of how well we've come forward with the Soccer Federation for Guam. We have a national program that we are establishing, and I'm proud to say I have 3 boys that are all in the national program. They started since U11. Some of them are still practicing with the men's Mattel team, and they're only 16 years old. So I commend this bill to help these volunteers that are trying to make good effort in developing our children of Guam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Senator Espeldon, you have any questions for the panel? If not, Senator Esteves, Vice Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I understand the intent of the bill. I just wanted to clarify. There's some language in other states that adds a little bit more and says that in order to receive the protection of the statute, the official must have participated in a safety orientation and training program established by the league. The statute, in one state, it says the statute does not cover officials who officiate in a public or private educational institution's athletic program. And the others are pretty much about this training program and making a distinction between nonprofit organizations conducting leagues and school leagues, I guess, or school liability, especially private schools, I guess. But so what is your, I just wanted to find out what your thoughts are on that. This says, the bill says, a person who provides services for the benefit of a nonprofit sports organization or nonprofit sports activity. The nonprofit sports activity, what would you say is included in that? I know the nonprofit sports organizations, but a nonprofit sports activity, what would that include?
Well, nonprofit sports activity would be any kind of activity that would fall under the expertise of that nonprofit organization. So, for example, our group handles the Guam Special Olympics champion softball program. Okay, so we partner with Guam Special Olympics to put on this softball program for the Olympic athletes. So that would be an example, I think, of an activity.
All right. And so would you say for that activity, it was all partnerships with nonprofits?
Yes, and on Guam, most of the organizations that do sports or sports-related activities are nonprofit. Because being a nonprofit allows you to do many things on Guam if you're not a nonprofit. There is a difference with, let's say, the school system. For example, teachers or sports teachers in the school system, they may have some other protection, but most of the coaches and parents that are involved in the nonprofit youth organizations are all those also the same coaches that teach in the high school and middle school levels, because they do it because they want to do it. So I'm not sure what the public school system has for protection for these coaches.
All right. Would you object to inclusion in this bill for a provision that says that they'd have to undergo training in order to be immune, to qualify for the immunity?
If I can add to the comment before we go into that answer.
Yes.
Wings Football Club, which I'm the president of that organization that's been established since 1985, we fall under the umbrella of the Guam Football Association as a member associate. Okay. As a member associate, we are subjected to certain regulations and rules that are governed under FIFA and Asian Federation. Okay. Those particular rules, every club associate member is afforded training programs, coaching certification, first aid training programs, developments for kids that want to become referees. So within our own organization, we structure various entities to help a child or a coach understand the rules of the play. We also teach them how to learn the game of play and understand fair play that's out there. So our structure, and I can speak thoroughly with the support of our organization, that we are afforded a lot of pathways to have training certification programs and licenses that are recognized internationally at no cost to our members associate, no cost to our coaches that are volunteering their time, because we have statutes that we have to fall under and be up and follow. So our recent ambitions in our organization is qualifying for what we call club licensing. Every club must have certain certification attributes for the club in order to protect the sport, the club, the organization, the children, and the coaches that support that sport. So we have structures, and I can say we because Guam Football Association is who I'm a part of. We afford these programs, and to protect what you're talking about, should we have these programs, if you have an organization already structured, that should come with it automatically. Okay? There's no difference if we a sporting federation like the Guam National Olympic Committee or the Guam Football Association or any other organization that has a major umbrella that they functions under, if they have a structure that they're part of a system, this is where they're afforded a lot of these opportunities to help organize and direct the club growth.
Yes, thank you. I can see that with those associated with FIFA and large organizations, they are very organized. They are receiving training, and probably maybe all the nonprofits are. I'm not sure, I guess. I just wanted to make sure. What is your feel for the whole community? Are all the nonprofits, do you think they undergo training for this?
Well, it's a borderline.
Pardon?
To me, it's a borderline in order to support the training, because what I've seen over the years in sports, I'd love to see something in place, but when you put something in place, what's there to help them to get the certification they need to be governed under, and who now is going to set those rules apart and understand who does it and who does not? Okay, so to institute a rule or a policy or a guide, I think we need to look at it very carefully of how it's structured. Understand the challenges of the organizations that are going through and the limitations that they have, and where they operate and function under.
All right, well, I want to thank you both. I understand what you're saying, and I support the bill. I just want to make sure whether we can just make it kind of uniform, that we're going to grant immunity, but everyone also is going to be held to a certain standard, perhaps just safety, something if there's something that we can do, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Speaker. Senator Spadon?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to, I'd just like to at least add to the conversation that the good Vice Speaker has brought up. And, you know, the other day in the Pacific Daily News, I believe it was, on the very back page, there was an article about the mayor of Sinahanya actually putting together a youth basketball league just for the villages, just for the Sinahanya village and for the youth in Sinahanya. And it was really actually moved forward by a parent who was coaching a son and it's a basketball league, who said he's not even a basketball fan or a basketball aficionado. He basically just wanted to be there and support this team and this whole village intramural structure because his sons love to play, they love to watch. And so the answer in terms of perhaps to address the situation that the Vice Speaker raises, perhaps we need to seriously look at it, because this particular league was more for the summer league for just the youth of Sinahanya, and it wasn't by any real organization. It was really under the mayor's office just to get the youth of the village active during the day while their parents are at work and they had something to do. So there's a lot we can talk about in terms of what we could add to strengthen the bill, and I look forward to that with the Vice Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Spadon. Senator Nelson, do you have any questions? No? Okay, great. Thank you very much for your testimony this evening. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, Bill 291-34. I'd like to call on Lacia Casillo and Fabian Regis. Before that, I'll ask the author of the bill, Senator Esteves, to give a brief summary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What Bill 291-34 moves to do is an act to amend subsection 322 of Chapter 3, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, and to add a new Chapter 36, Title 7, Guam Code Annotated, relative to allowing individuals to change their legal sex designation on their birth certificates. Now, the purpose of this, Mr. Chairman, is because the Guam law already does have an allowance for the changing or amendment of a birth certificate. But what we found is that with the transgender community, not just locally, but across the United States and abroad, is that these individuals who live their life with their identified gender can go their whole lives trying to achieve this full transformation or whatever part that they're able to afford. And it really comes down to financial constraints that can sometimes make this dream never come true. But I think just as a matter of freedom, as I look at it, we have a responsibility to ensure that we don't infringe upon the freedom of these citizens. And somebody's asked me and challenged me many times as to my motives and my determination. And I was taught long ago when answering that question, where does one person's freedom end and where does another's begin? And I think one person's freedom ends when somebody else interferes with that. And so with that, I don't think the government has any position to restrict an individual from identifying, it's the gender they choose to identify with, because it in no way inhibits or gets in the way or prevents or harms the freedom of another individual. And we have a responsibility to support the decision to change their legal designation, just as we would do with somebody changing their name. But see, these are two very different things, Mr. Chairman, as we've seen, because the identification of a gender for an individual is not even just a lifestyle decision. It's a part of who they are. to their very core. And we have to respect that from these individuals, Mr. Chairman. And I think this bill moves to address that. And before we can have discussions on anti-discrimination, I think we as a government have to identify them as a class of individuals that we have underserved and haven't identified and really have let down in the long term. So with this, Mr. Chairman, what this does is it allows them to do this and make the amendment to their birth certificate without having to undergo the surgical procedure. And so with that, it allows them to live and be recognized as the gender that they identify with, which I believe is inherent in their ability to live freely and live happily with who they are. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to hear this, for this bill to be heard.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. We have Lacia Casil and Fabian Regis. If whoever wishes to provide testimony on this bill, I invite you to come forward. Okay. Lacia, we'll start with you.
Hafaday and good evening, Chairman Rodriguez, Vice Speaker Terlahi, Senators Munya, Esteves, Espadon, and Senator Nelson. Lily Wachowski, Lana Wachowski, Janet Mock, Laverne Cox, Chaz Bono, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Alexandra Billings, Jamie Clayton, Laura Jane Grace, Amanda Simpson, Kim Coco Iwamoto, Chris Mosier, Stu Rasmussen, Geraldine Roman, Danica Roam, Philip Cunningham, Balian Bushman, and Shyler Baylor. Most in this room will have no clue who any of these people are, but all of these individuals are trans and have changed their names and gender identity to reflect who they feel they really are. They are famous movie directors, authors, community activists, musicians, a former Deputy Assistant of Defense for Operational Energy in the White House, Olympic athletes, a mayor, congressional politicians in the Philippines, the former director of the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission, a recently elected member of the House of Delegates in Virginia, city council members, and an Ivy League school swim star. They are positive role models for our trans youth and LGBTQ community. I know who they are. Our LGBTQ community knows who they are. But just 10, 20 years ago, many of us didn't know who they are because they had to hide their names and their gender identity from the public. Because they hid themselves, we had no positive role models in our community. And these kids thought they also needed to hide. I know because I was one of those kids hiding. Trans people were so badly stereotyped by society. I thought the only thing I could aspire to be when I grow up was a psychopath in a horror film, a sex worker, a drug dealer, or the object of ridicule on some morning talk show like Jerry Springer. No human being wakes up and says that to themselves, today I choose for the rest of my life daily discrimination, daily persecution, daily physical and mental abuse, and probable suicide, or being the victim of a hate crime, or possibly murdered. 5-year-old kids certainly don't ask for this, but this is what they have ahead of them because of bigots, homophobia, and transphobia. 5 years old is as far back as I can remember realizing that I am different than the other boys at school. 35 years old is the statistical number that most people like me don't make it past. I am lucky. I made it past that point by a decade, but I still feel the brunt of discrimination daily. Just recently, someone said to my face, "You're a man and always will be." Sorry, too loud? These things don't faze me anymore. My skin, it's thick like an alligator, but it's our LGBT youth and the most vulnerable that still need protecting from this kind of hate. Changing one's name and gender identification on one's ID and birth certificate is a tool for empowerment for members of our community to lift themselves up and fight against discrimination. It is a means for gaining employment, health care, housing, and safety. I was fired from a job in 1993 because of these ID problems. Not being able to get a job put me out homeless and working on the street, as many, many people, trans youth, are subject to because they can't get the right ID or gender identity on their ID. I've heard so much of the fear-mongering and boogeyman stories about trans people getting a simple thing like ID and using it to attack women and children in bathrooms, which is absolutely not true. 19 states and 200 cities have passed anti-discrimination laws based on sexual orientation and gender identity and supporting things like this bill. There are 0 reports of trans people attacking women and children. This simply doesn't happen. It's an urban myth. Vice Speaker, Chairman, Senators, I ask that you please give my trans brothers and trans sisters the tools and the confidence to help raise themselves up and be good, law-abiding citizens that contribute to our community. Please pass this bill into law. Dank u si duis masi.
Thank you very much for your testimony, ma'am.
Hafide and good evening, senators and chairmen. I'm actually really not formally prepared to testify. I came down here because I heard that the bill was being heard, and it's really my first time to read the bill, but just at first sight, some of the things that first come to mind as the way the bill is written is it doesn't allow for the limitations for the number of times that a person can change their gender. So, today I'm a woman, but let's say later on down the road, in 5 years, I decide, well, you know what, I really identify myself as a man. And then in the next 5 years, I'll change myself again. So, it presents a lot of complications, I think, to society as the way the bill is written. Another thing that it also doesn't address is how will it affect the statistics in the long run, and the statistics as we keep track of, so that we can get federal funding, et cetera. And my primary reason for coming down here and just wanting to know more about the bill is the danger that it poses to me. As a woman, I have a young daughter, I have many young nieces, to have transgender people who are anatomically male, because the bill does not address that. You can be anatomically male, have a penis, and use a woman's restroom. You can have a penis and be in the gym, changing freely. How does that affect me as a woman? How will I be traumatized? What about my 15-year-old daughter who may have never seen the apparatus of a man, who does not have any kind of relations? The trauma that it would cause for that, my daughter and other young women to have to go through that. And so that is a primary concern for me, is the danger as the bill is written, that it doesn't allow or it does not address that. Basically, if you want to change your sex on your birth certificate, you can. You just have to go through psychological testing. And I think that it requires, more research and to be presented.
Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. I want to open up if there's any questions from the panel up here. Senator Esteves, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And I appreciate the testimony from both individuals. These are common questions that come up, and the bill does in many ways address that. The way this bill is written, it's the Superior Court of Guam that goes through that. It's actually more than just a psychological evaluation. The courts don't just give a free pass. They still have to go before a judge that makes the determination. So they'll look at things like outstanding warrants, any criminal history, and they also recognize that the psychological evaluation ensures that the person is of sound mind. In all of the members of the transgender community that I've spoken to, I think one thing is clear, that it's commonly misunderstood that the changing or identification of a gender isn't like changing an outfit. It truly is part of who they are, and I don't expect it to become an issue where somebody will just say, well, tomorrow I want to be a man and I want to be a woman again. And I think even if that were to happen, the courts would recognize that as, and the counselors and those that do the psychological evaluation would be able to identify that as a red flag and present that before the court in making their determination. And so I think there are enough checks and balances, and I do appreciate the testimony and understand for the concern. But again, it's about the freedom of individuals and what rights they're allowed versus the rights of others. And I think this does well to protect those rights.
Thank you very much, Senator. Vice Speaker, any questions?
Last year, I know you're very well informed of these laws. Does this law look uniform to you with other states, or does it have any peculiarities? Wait, can you turn their microphone on?
Actually, when it was being drafted, I did send some information on other states to Senator Esteves, particularly from New York City. And that's where I was living when I went through my transition. And there are a lot of checks and balances. You know, you can't just walk in and say, one day I'm going to be this and, you know, I'm going to be that. So there is a long process that safeguards.
Yeah. All right. One thing I was looking at is this. It says the court shall schedule a hearing and may, not shall, may order the petitioner to provide a notice of the hearing to other parties with a legal interest. So this is different than other court hearings where what's the usual process is that they have to provide notice to any other parties involved. And in some cases, in some types of hearings, we have to provide notice to the public, right? Or publish it in different places just in case there's anybody who might need to know. That's the case for change of names. And so that's why I'm asking about this here. Is this usual that they would not make a public notice to change? I'm on page 4, 37104, hearing of the petition.
I have my glasses. What line, Speaker?
Line 27. It says this notice of the hearing to other parties with a legal interest, and that seems that the court may order that. It's not like a regular mandatory notice goes out like it does for a change of name. And so I was just curious if you could send us information regarding that point, if you have it. Okay. I'll look it up too, but just...
Can I get back to you on that?
Sure, yeah. Yes. Yeah. And what maybe also what your thoughts are on that, whether it needs to be, whether it shouldn't be a public notice. That's my question.
I think with changing the name, most definitely. But this changing your birth certificate, it's a private matter.
All right.
I personally don't agree with having to publish, you know, such a private thing. It's not going to affect anyone, any individual, you changing one you know, a letter on your birth certificate. Right. The name definitely, but your gender identity, no.
Okay, so maybe we'll distinguish those two. And all right. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but thank you for your testimony. And I just wanted to ask you also one question. When you suggested, wait, I wrote it down, that there should be more studies done, I think. Can you just be more specific? What kind of studies are you thinking need to be done?
Well, I mean, I'm sitting here and all I'm hearing is the protection of transgender rights. What about my rights? You know, as I mentioned, what about my daughter's rights to be protected from the trauma of, you know, having to change in front of a man? What about my minor son's rights? You know, as a young boy, male growing up, having to share a restroom with a fully developed woman who identifies themselves or, you know, has gone through gender change. So those kind of things, I'm not sure what the trauma is to that, but I certainly, I have never seen, I mean, my personal, you know, self, have never seen a grown man until I was an adult myself. I don't want my 15-year-old to be exposed to something like that. So here we are talking about the rights of the transgender community, and I completely respect that. But I think that those that are not transgender also have a right to be protected as well. You know, that's a trauma to me. It would be a trauma to my daughter. It would be a trauma to my son. So how do we protect that, and how do we incorporate that into this law? I mean, do we have separate bathrooms for them? What do we do? Because I can be anatomically a female. I can go into and change my gender on a birth certificate and go into a male's bathroom and change at the gym. Same with a man. I would not want a grown man to be changing in the bathroom with my 15-year-old daughter.
All right.
You know, but he's a female. He can say, hey, on my ID, I'm a female. But you're not a female. You're physically a man, and that doesn't address that. And that's a very big concern for myself, and it's a danger, psychologically and physically.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Vice Speaker.
Madam Vice Speaker, if I could just address the name change and gender. So with the name change, and we did look into this, the name change is because with regards to debts and other financial encumbrances on an individual, people would try to use a name change as debt evasion. Now, however, the gender identification has no effect on that. And so with the public notice being put out with regards to any debts that might be incurred, now it's not uncommon at all. It's actually quite common that when individuals go through a gender identification change legally, it's usually associated with a change of the name. And then at that point, then it would go out publicly if there's on the portion of the legal name change to let any debtors know whether or not this may affect them or their ability to collect.
Yes, well, that's why I was questioning her. I'm just we'll talk about it later, but I'm going to propose that we separate name changes and anything else. Yes.
Thank you, Senators. We'll work with the senators when this is back in the committee, so that once we report it out, that it takes into consideration everyone's comments here this evening. Okay, Senator Espadon, you have any?
I threw this legislation past several people, and I guess the biggest thing, and I'll address this to you, Ms. Casil, is that why would we need to change the birth certificate? And the argument is that when a child is born, the doctor makes a determination, I guess, based upon genitalia, whether it's a male or a female that was born, and that's what they enter into the birth certificate at the moment of birth. That's what the child is recognized at gender-wise. What's the necessity for having the birth certificate changed if at that moment of birth, that's basically the fact of the matter, the weight of the child, the size of the child, the parents of the child, the gender of the child, the date of the birth, and whatnot. Basically, those are kind of like facts that are put in as part of the record. What's the necessity to change the facts of that birth on that particular moment? And that's what it is and was. That's what's been posed to me. And so I need to ask you.
Well, science has made leaps and bounds, and it's not black and white anymore. And I think we have the medical backing that there's a spectrum. You know, people have different chromosomes, there's intersex people, there's transgender people, and the medical profession backs this up. The reason for the change of the birth certificate is, as I stated, for getting proper ID. It may affect housing, healthcare, safety. You know, if a trans person is going to a bar and they get ID'd, and the bartender, and it's happened to me, or, you know, they look at the ID and then they look at me, you know, we get discriminated against. And then there's that, just being a whole person. you know, as a trans person, it means so much to be a whole person and have that. As I stated, the confidence that it brings, you know, to go out there and be who you are. It's just another building block in that as well.
Okay, I appreciate the answer, but again, it's one of those issues that within, like I said, within the people that I've kind of pushed this legislation on and get their thoughts on it, it wasn't so much the issue of a person being transgender or anything else. It was the issue of the recordation of what the facts were on the day that the child was born, and if that's recognized. But until, and I guess in response to your response, until the scientific method of identifying the gender of a baby at birth is utilized, any new scientific evidence to be able to make that determined on the day of birth, again, the question, at least in most of the people, if not all, I tell you the truth, all the people that I've kind of thrown this out to, was just like, it's not a matter of discrimination in their minds, because I think in this society, it's, on the science society, and we're definitely at a new point in our acceptance levels, but in terms of the fact of the matter on that specific date of the birth of the child, and the child was recognized as one gender or the other, that was the fact on that specific date. But I do understand your explanation, but again, I have to think about this to try to see if maybe there's a better way to do this, you know.
There are some governments that are changing that and putting a third sex on the birth certificate.
And that might be the way to go going forward. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Nelson? No? Okay, so we've publicly heard Bill 291-34. We'll work with the sponsor of the legislation and see how we can move this bill forward. Thank you very much for both of you for your testimony this evening. We'll now move on. We have two bills. We have nobody here that signed up to testify. We have Bill 319-34. We'll go ahead and let the sponsor of the bill speak about it, and from there call the hearing. Senator Espadon on Bill 319-34. I'm sorry.
I'll speak on it very briefly, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. Bill number 319 amends the Guam Visitors Bureau Rainy Day Fund to provide more funding to replenish the cash deposits tapped by the GVB Board of Directors in recent months. Presently in law, the Rainy Day Fund basically states that Guam Visitors Bureau shall put aside $200,000 or 1.5% of the adopted revenue of the Tourist Attraction Fund, whichever is lower. 319 switches that and actually mandates that they shall put aside into the Rainy Day Fund $200,000 or 1.5% of the adopted revenue projection of the Tourist Attraction Fund, whichever amount is greater. As an example, using the 2018 adopted revenue projection of $44 million, this means that GVB would be banking $660,000 rather than $200,000. The beauty of the GVB Rainy Day Fund is that it is under the control of GVB Board of Directors, who may use its deposits under certain unique and emergency situations. In recent months, the GVB Board has tapped the fund for activities to bolster the Japan market. In these trying economic times, it is of the utmost importance that GVB have access to these deposits as its needs warrant. While it took many years to build up the fund's balance, it only takes one economic or natural disaster to occur to significantly decrease the same balance. An amendment was made to the GVB Rainy Day Fund in the recently passed fiscal year 2019 budget bill. In that amendment, the GVB board was authorized to deposit up to $650,000, which basically represents 1.5% of the Tourist Attraction Fund. Bottom line, Mr. Chair, this basically allows for prudent savings by the Guam Visitors Bureau, and instead of putting the minimum in, we're saying that they should put the maximum amount in, which is 1.5% of the Tourist Attraction Fund each year. Because we've seen that since this fund was created, and very humbly I say that I was the one who authored this bill back in the 29th Guam legislature that created the Rainy Day Fund, $200,000 has been put in, and it has taken quite an amount of time just to get to $1 million. And in one fell swoop, they were able to take half of that because of what they felt was an emergency, and leaving the fund, again, at a minimum balance. We believe that they should save for a rainy day. That's why it's called the Rainy Day Fund, and put in 1.5% of the Tourist Attraction Fund. And that's the impetus of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Espaldon. We'll continue to receive written testimony, and the committee will include it in the committee report. So Bill 319 has been duly heard. Next item on the agenda is Bill 57-34. We also don't have anyone here to testify on this bill. This bill is legislation to start a process to expand the use of EMS personnel and implement what is called Community Paramedicine Outreach Program. The Community Paramedicine Outreach Program is a new and evolving model of community-based healthcare in which EMS personnel function outside their customary emergency response and transport roles. What it is in short, EMH staff in your village will come to your home and check a variety of medical concerns within the scope of their training. These concerns can range from wound care, short-term follow-up care after hospital discharge, blood pressure checks, or just reminding you to take your medication. The EMS staff becomes the link between the home and the formal medical profession. Community paramedics collaborate with physicians, nurses, behavioral health professionals, and social workers to fill gaps in the health and social services safety net. Finally, this bill starts a process and sets in place the infrastructure for a community paramedicine outreach program and requires the EMS Commission to start putting the pieces together to make this a reality. And so the committee will continue to receive written testimony on this bill. We'll now move on to three other bills on the agenda. Bill 326-34, which is relative to granting waiver authority to the governor of Guam for certain requirements related to the laboratories and dispensaries, as those requirements are set out in the Joaquin Casey Conception II Compassionate Cannabis Use Act of 2013. We also have two other pieces of legislation, which is Bill 302, is relative to permitting the home cultivation of medicinal cannabis under certain conditions, and Bill 327-34, which is relative to eliminating the requirement of 51% local ownership in a medical cannabis testing laboratory. Because we do have the same individuals who signed up to testify on all three bills, I'll go ahead and when I call you up, you may provide testimony on all three bills at the same time. Okay, so I'd like to first call on Ms. Andrea Pelicani, Mr. August Fest, Mr. Will Parkinson, and anyone else who wishes to testify. I don't have a...
Mr. Chair, could I ask, on these bills and on the last bill, Public Health has not given us any input. Is
yes,
there a
well,
reason?
The acting director was here for another item on the agenda. He claims that they did not receive notice of the hearing, and so they will be providing written notice to the committee. But the committee will be open to having a follow-up roundtable if necessary.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and recognize Senator Muña to open up on her bill, and then we'll go ahead and take testimony. Mr. Jonathan Savares as well. And sir, would you like to testify as well? Mr. Savares, is he here still?
Oh, he stepped out.
He stepped out, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. We even have a drum roll outside before we begin. It's God-given drum roll. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that our medical cannabis program is viable, and I really do applaud your efforts in getting it operational. Thank you so much for that. Guam's medicinal cannabis law is now 4 years old. Unfortunately, there are so many people who are terminally ill and remain unable to benefit from this type of relief from cannabis that this law provides or should provide for them. Bill number 302 will allow for limited home cultivation of cannabis until such a time that a dispensary is operational. If allowed to cultivate, patients could begin receiving long-awaited relief within months. Now, I do want to stress, too, that I don't disagree with dispensaries and labs. It's definitely pharmaceutical, and we definitely need a lab. We need to test medicine as we do with all medicines. In the meantime, there are many patients, some who I even know and very close to, who have passed, and even the ones who are still living today who are in need and continue to be denied this relief. There are over 19,000 people who voted for this medicinal cannabis law, and we still haven't been able to implement it. I think that the certified patients' needs could be met if we could cultivate cannabis for their personal use until such a time a dispensary opens. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator Muña. Ms. Pellicani?
Will I be, right, we saw it outside. Will I be testifying on all the bills?
You can start with that bill first, and then if you want to, you can testify on the others simultaneously.
Okay. I've been spending so much time watching you all on TV. It's actually a pleasure to see you in 3D here.
And we spend our time listening to you, so it's a pleasure to see your face too.
You guys are better than Netflix, by the way. Hafide, Chairman Rodriguez, and members of the Committee on Health. I would like to thank you, Senator Rodriguez and Senator Muña, for introducing these bills and allowing us the time to testify on the measures that are before us. Before I discuss the bills, I'd like to reiterate that the executive branch has failed in its duty to execute that law in place that the people of Guam have overwhelmingly supported with a vote of 19,692. Since then, they have produced no tangible results, no formal commission meeting, and no meaningful budget. How many more laws can this legislature pass as the governor and the Department of Public Health and Social Services continues to kick this can down the road, essentially thumbing their collective noses at the people of Guam? Thank you to the members of both the 33rd and the 34th Guam legislature for having an open door for us as the executive branch continues to ignore the will and mandate of the people it is supposed to serve. Creating more laws does not solve the problems. The myths that continue to spread in the community are merely symptoms of the problem. It just continues to keep us in this hamster wheel, spinning and spinning so they can stall, roadblock, or whatever it is that is happening to our mandate. I have my testimony for 327. I guess I'll move to 320 or 302. Grassroots Guam is in full support of home cultivation. I think this could contribute greatly to encourage more registered patients. However, we are somewhat discouraged that our government refuses to address protecting the employment status of our cannabis patients, which will continue to keep them hiding in the dark. Home cultivation on its own could flood the black market and dangerous products for patients. It's been 2 years. I put 34th, but that's supposed to be 34th. And I have still seen no effort to address this conflict, though we have made numerous pleas to a few senators and the Department of Administration. We have been told we are working on it, which is the line we receive when nobody is working on it or there is no interest to work on it. Maybe as the election draws closer, someone will pick up this banner to protect our patients and government employees. We humbly ask you to study and consider the history of states who have enacted unregulated programs for lengthy periods of time. I say this because Senator Muña has made it clear that this would be a stopgap to get patients some access that they have been waiting for almost 4 years. What if, after our election, we put in place a governor that does not support cannabis, like Lieutenant Governor Ray Quick Draw Tenorio. I say this with levity, but I say it also to make a point. There was a point in time where we were talking about random drug testing all employees, and this really put fear in a lot of government employees that they were going to lose their retirement. And that's why I bring this up. I mean, the same fair questions were asked when Donald Trump was running for president. What was going to happen to cannabis policy reform and the progress? How much further will he kick this can down the road, just like our current governor? It could happen, and that would be another reason why potential investors will continue to shy away from Guam and look to our brothers and sisters in the CNMI who are well on their way to legalizing cannabis for adult use, because it seems they actually have the support of their government, unlike Guam. Home cultivation and regulated commercial markets need to work hand in hand. It creates checks and balances for businesses. It allows patients better access, but it needs to work together. Home cultivation doesn't promote more sophisticated delivery methods that patients may find more convenient and discreet, which is properly tested and dosed, such as transdermal patches, suppositories, or any other delivery method that would be made available with manufacturers in place. And the only option that would leave them is smoking or vaping. Experimenting with oils or tinctures could cost them their uninterrupted supply of medicine, since their inventory would be severely limited on this bill. Most importantly, legal cannabis businesses should be the most important resource for patients who are interested in home cultivation, so they could access safe genetics, education, products, and training to properly grow at home safely. This is how home cultivation should be working. This current measure just encourages keeping people on the streets. Without legal cannabis businesses, patients will be left without proper guidance. That's one of the things that we fear, that there will be nobody out there to assist them. For two very good case studies of the potential worst case scenarios, look no further than Hawaii and California. California and Hawaii were both early adopters of non-regulated patient models in 1996 and 2000, respectively. Both programs have enabled a robust gray market that they have difficulty converting into a regulated market to this day. Both California and Hawaii, with new lab requirements, these are new requirements, have tested with many of the products on the market or on the street failing to meet standard, including those that have been entered in top cannabis competitions. In that thick packet that I gave you, there are some articles in there. A lot of them are recent, with a lot of the genetics in Hawaii. Now that they have a new lab, 75% of them are failing to meet standard for patients. There are many problems in California's new regulated market because they've been unregulated for a very, very long time. Hawaii is important to note because Department of Public Health and Social Services mirrored many of their onerous regulations. 75% of the homegrown product failed to meet standard. Cannabis is non-toxic. However, with limited studies on the effects of pesticides, people will think that they could go pick something up at Home Depot and use it. This is not the case. Pyrolysis is real, and we have provided this listing also in the thick packet to you. At least 3 other occasions we provided this pesticide listing to the Department of Public Health and Social Services and at other public hearings. They update this list every few months. I believe this one is as of July of this year. Accepted food grade and tobacco grade pesticides must be enforced, as well as our ban on butane extraction. So these are, the butane extraction ban is in our statute. Take a look at our own history. We have decriminalized the possession of up to 1 ounce of cannabis. With no enforcement, who is going to fill the market demand? These contrary laws continue to have a direct influence in enabling a very robust black market, as Guam is ranked consistently in the top 5 in illicit cannabis consumption by the UN World Drug Report. I've also provided a copy of the Cole Memo to you. I won't go into the history of the Cole Memo, other than to note that the entire regulated market, that's the market we now know, was built on compliance with this policy. Though AG Jeff Sessions has rescinded this memo, it would be prudent to put sensible regulations in place to continue compliance with the rest of the regulated industry in the United States. If we have a new Attorney General that will come in and put it back into place, we want to ensure that our program is in compliance. I know you want to simplify the measure, but I also know that a few of your colleagues, Senator Muñoz, would probably not support a loose program. I have met with all of them. The governor vetoed Senator Tina Muñoz Barnes's bill 344 because it would have needed more enforcement and maybe an additional set of regulations. That policy that was vetoed was reviewed by top industry attorneys in Colorado to ensure they met Cole Memo standard. Senator Rodriguez, you're familiar, your office has done work with these attorneys as well. They helped Senator Rodriguez provide an opinion on federal protections for doctors. So you can attest that they're very legitimate and they're top-tier cannabis lawyers. We should note to keep our program safe from potential future federal government intervention, as we never know what's going to happen from one year to the next. So we should consider adding some measures to discourage diversion to minors and sending patients into a black market. Because the patients that won't register, like government employees who fear losing their jobs or fear losing their retirement, will still continue to purchase in the black market if we just enact a home cultivation program. So I just wanted to make a couple quick points to note on the bill. Medical tourism for cannabis is now legal. This is not addressed anywhere in this bill, so I don't know if there are any particular issues that should be considered with medical tourists. It should be noted that one harvest could be about 4 months from immature to flowering, with another few weeks to cure. Contracts have a 50-50 chance of getting thrown out of court. I wanted to point this out because leases are also contracts. There is nothing here that sets any requirement for consent to at least give the lessee a chance to litigate. There is a clause that prohibits home cultivation if a landlord does not allow it, but there should be consent language to at least try to give a patient a chance to fight it in court. Please also note that legal ethics guidelines still have not been addressed. Patients who want to consider home cultivation will not be able to seek legal guidance for any of this, leaving them to interpret the complexities of this law for themselves. Yet another failure of our esteemed community leaders. There is no requirement for DPHSS to provide any sort of training or brochures or anything to help patients navigate this complex law. Cannabis policy is complex, it's also contrary, and it's also in a state of flux. I don't bring these things up to complicate the issues, but every cannabis policy should be reviewed by a cannabis lawyer who is familiar with ongoing issues across the United States. Lastly, I know, Chairman Rodriguez, as the Oversight Chair, you do use your power most judiciously, and I am aware of that. However, I humbly ask that we continue to press the Department of Public Health and Social Services on any milestones for this program. When will our commission have their first formal meeting? In almost 4 years since the law passed. I don't even know who's on the commission. It is the mission of Grassroots Guam to get cannabis off the street and to provide patients with safe access that they deserve. That should include providing cuttings, seeds, plants in all stages, workshops, and education or training materials on best practices for home cultivation. On behalf of Grassroots Guam, we thank you for the opportunity to discuss improvements to our program.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pilakani. Did you have anything else?
I do have one short testimony for the other bill.
Okay.
Did you want to?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay. So for Bill 327, we have heard over and over again that the biggest roadblock for this program is that there is no interested lab. Let's just pretend that we've had the diagnostic standards prior to passage this year, and let's just pretend that DPHSS did not receive a letter of intent, for which they did not even receive an application before it was deemed a fraud. Let's just go with the fiction that no lab is interested. Grassroots Guam is in full support of removing the requirement for local ownership. The local community and local investors have had 3.5 years to step up to the plate. Forcing a stateside lab who would bring in the equipment, expertise, and funding for a minority share of the laboratory could be prohibitive to actually setting up a lab. A business is much harder to dissolve than a marriage, sadly to say, but this could potentially open doors. We believe the local community has had many opportunities to step forward, so we would be in support of removing that barrier if that would encourage outside investment in a lab. I've been criticized for continuing to support the lab requirement. With the climate of corruption currently taking hold of government of Guam, it is important to note that an independent lab, separate and apart from any business entity or the government, is the key to a fair and free market and a responsible industry. Grassroots will stand firm on protecting the need for a lab, for our patients, and for a responsible industry. For Bill 326, we're going to defer to the committee, as this is really not a cannabis issue. It's more government processes, and so your expertise is probably much better than anything I could ever offer.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pilakani, for your testimony. We'll just go down the line. That's all right.
My name is Jonathan Savares. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Senators, Mr. Chairman, for giving us this opportunity to look at and examine these 3 bills that hopefully we can get, that would help get this whole program process sped up. The first thing I want to address is Senator Munoz's bill, the home cultivation. I think that if we look into, something that I was pondering was, like myself, I don't have the access to grow, to cultivate in my home, and I won't allow my daughter to be raised up with plants being cultivated at home, especially, you know, because it attracts negative attention, and I don't like that negative attention associated with myself. It's something I would like us to look, the body to look into is the possibility of an approved cultivator that possibly we get Department of Public Health to verify and give them the statutes of what the government is requiring them, how to what cultivation methods and approved pesticides and thus far so forth so on. So we have that kind of protection that and an oversight to somebody to overlook what look over what they're possibly doing, and by getting these approved cultivators, and it would have to be new verbiage, because currently I think you used a caregiver, which I think my legal caregiver is my wife, and it doesn't make sense for her to be, if I don't want to deal with that cultivation in my home, or with cultivation in my home, then of course I'm not going to deem my caregiver to do this. I'm not going to put my caregiver in that kind of position. So I think that's a verbiage issue that we need to look at, and possibly at least an opportunity to get these cultivators, these people who are interested in cultivation, leg up and get them ready for that regulatory side, or the regulations, and try to train them and get them conditioned to within those process to follow the steps and procedures that the government would like to uphold. Other than that, either way we do it, I just want this program to be stood up. I want patients to ensure that patients have safe access to the laboratories. Huge thing, the 51%. I know I sat down with Chuck Tanner and Senator Rodriguez, and we went over this thing, looking at and what are our options. We talked about a couple of years ago. We talked about a 5-year monopoly, basically, and it's just that doesn't make sense for us to do that. You know, local investors have had over almost 4 years to make an opportunity, that leap of faith. As a patient, I want to see this program stood up and move forward. I know there's a lot of other patients who call me on a regular basis saying that, hey, where are we at? You know, and hearing those calls and those concerns, it just says that there's a need, but because we don't have anything moving, why push? Why are these guys going to constantly just put their neck on the line And so, you know, I hear that concern, and I'm pretty sure many of people on this committee have heard those concerns. So I do support from a patient standpoint. I would like, especially these outside entities, if they're an established lab moving into Guam, they already have the processes in place that they can just bring straight to Guam. It's not like we're reinventing the wheel. And the third bill, the governor, the authorization to the executive committee to make to push this program forward, and versus us going back through this. I know there's a 30-day window. I think that, you know, you guys know best on exactly what we need to do in order to get things going, and I trust that the decision will be made on the floor to ensure that. Something I did want to bring up. Today I was up at UOG, and as a patient, as a medical cannabis patient, certified by Guam law, the University of Guam, I posed to my ADA, my accommodations, the accommodations people up at the university, what if I am G4S, because G4S patrols the school campus, what am I going, and G4S finds cannabis in my vehicle, or Mandangan, or any other entity, what is, am I protected by the university? You know, we say that we allow people to bring medication, and you know, that was how this was brought up, was, hey, this is, I have the legal documentation from the governor of Guam, and is the university going to support, figure out how we're going to support, are we going to find some support, or are we going to just kind of run away like a lot of other entities have, and wait till another entity? This is time that it's time that the government starts stepping up, and entities start stepping up, and for their employees, for the people of Guam. You know, everybody wants to sway away from this subject. 3 years, almost 4 years, and patients are still suffering. I feel fortunate that I was able to fall in when there were more doctors that were proactive. But now very rare do we see any doctors coming up and saying anything and supporting this. And by that lack of support from, especially the executive branch, I felt that saying that, hey, yes, we are gonna help the patients, and we are gonna help this program move forward. And whatever protections we need, if we need to talk about protections, we got to establish that within our government first. And now I'm a student up at UOG, and carrying my the medicine that the doctor has deemed useful for me is coming into question up at one of our establishments here on Guam. We need to start looking at how we can create these models that's going to integrate. I know Senator Regina Lee talked about looking at the government of Guam a couple months ago, talked about looking at how the government of Guam to find out which employees could qualify, you know, and they'll start looking at those statutes. And I think we also need to look at it for people using the facilities. You know, the customers, the end patients, the patients that are going to use these facilities need to be taken into consideration as well. And I'm just running into this now, and at least looking at it now versus somebody getting arrested. Yeah, if I didn't pose the question, I wouldn't know that this is an issue. I had a person up at the university tell me, oh, it's not even legal. And that's from one of the ADA compliance offices. I had a person tell me it's not even legal. And it shows just how out of kind of sync that we are, and we're not bringing everybody to the table to try to get everybody on one page. And I think once we start getting more and more people on one page to move this program forward, we'll start seeing more patients come up, and we'll start seeing that support from the community saying, hey, yes, we are going to get behind our patients. We are going to get behind our cancer patients, and these people who actually need who need cannabis to help them. And I don't know who was here too when I first came up and I started talking and I spoke. you can see the clear loss of weight. I'm down 40 pounds. And everybody says on cannabis you're going to gain more weight. How do you justify that I've lost 40 pounds? I don't need my kidney functions test is back at 100%. Same thing with my liver. My COPD is managed better than it has been in years. My anxiety is down. I just came back from Philippines, and I was telling the senator that my anxiety was so off because I didn't have any medication, not just cannabis, but I gave up my psychoactive medication to deal with my anxiety. And now it's time for us to start moving forward and getting our government lined up. This new administration, whoever it may be, the new senators coming up, I know a lot of these new senators are pro-recreational marijuana, and I'm looking at this guy right here because I have a conversation with him about it all the time. And I tell him, make sure we think about our patients first. We need to make sure that we have a par stock that's set for how many patients we anticipate. And the only way to really solidify that number is the way that I feel that we can solidify that number is to have this medicinal program stand up first and then get that baseline. And then by creating that baseline, we can move forward. And the only way for us to accomplish that is to get the lab, the other requirements. There's quite a few requirements that a lot of people are not looking at to get this up. But other than that, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savares. Thank you. Mr. Parkinson?
Hello, everyone. My name is William Parkinson. Some of you may know me as Democratic Senatorial Candidate number 17. But today, I speak to you as a citizen advocate for cannabis. I believe in cannabis as a product. I believe it is the way to bring Guam to untold prosperity. I believe it is a way to take care of our medical community. And I want cannabis to succeed. And because I want cannabis to succeed, I cannot support this bill. This bill has a fundamental misunderstanding of what is required to make cannabis cultivation successful and a positive force on the island. First off, home cultivation cannot be effectively implemented without first widespread legalization of cannabis for adult use. This includes worker protections, and we need a viable market to complement home cultivation. Without adult use legalization of cannabis, home cultivation will put a great strain on law enforcement's already strained resources. Police are overworked, underfunded, and underappreciated. Let's not make their jobs unnecessarily harder. To do it properly, you must implement home cultivation with a full adult use legalization together. That is when you actually reduce the strain on law enforcement because you simplify the enforcement. Without that important component of full legalization, you only make a police officer's job more complex by requiring them to be trained and to dedicate resources to discern between legitimate and illegitimate grows. Rather than reducing the strain, you've only added to it, making life more difficult for officer and citizen alike. Second, 6 plants is not enough to satisfy a medicinal patient's needs year-round. A proper home cultivation needs at least 12 plants to properly satisfy a single medicinal cannabis patient's needs. On top of that, home cultivation fails to provide immediate, tangible relief to cannabis patients. Some of these people live in constant pain and do not have the time or the resources to learn an entirely new skill to provide themselves with basic medicine that their government has failed to provide for them despite making their voices and desires known since 2014. The intentions and spirit of this bill are undoubtedly good, but it is misguided and short-sighted half measure that attempts to put a Band-Aid on the gunshot wound that has been the failed implementation of medicinal cannabis from the executive branch. We must go back to the drawing board and add a provision for full adult legalization so we can have a commercial market to complement home cultivation and worker protections to make sure people that partake in this program aren't putting their careers at risk. We also need to increase the provision to 12 plants allowed. This is what must be done if we want home cultivation to be a positive force that gives island residents a holistic option for their care and medication. If you cannot do that this term, I hope you can support my efforts to promote full adult legalization with that same noble and well-intentioned spirit next term. This bill is a half-measured that does not go far enough. Without full adult-use cannabis legalization included with the home cultivation, me as a strong advocate in favor of cannabis, I cannot support this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson. Next up, we have Mr. Concepcion.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. I reviewed this bill that I have in front of me, 302-34, and this for the home cultivation. You know, 5 years ago, I sat here and I spoke to people, nice, wonderful people that were up there where you guys are sitting at right now. And, you know, I've always had the confidence that our own people could make our lives just a little bit better. We're talking about medicinal marijuana. We're talking about medicinal cannabis, something that will help out those folks. Well, that's water under the bridge. And I hate to say this, but it came to the point where none of you folks was able to make that decision whether we should do it or not. And it went out to the public. And we had 19,000, 11,000 people that said, yes, that we're going to do this. You know, we read the paper, we listen to the media, and we hear things about budget and how much money we have, how much money we don't have, how much money we need to make things work. This is the opportunity for us to go out and approve this, pass this bill. There's nothing else out there. Do we have, you know, those two other additional or amendments to this particular bill that Senator Muñoz had written? Do we have an alternative? Do we have assurances that tomorrow when that laboratory, or we have somebody that's interested in building a laboratory, will be built so that those people that are suffering and they have this thing that go alleviating some of their pains because of the debilitating diseases that they have in them? Is it a guarantee that it's going to happen? You know, I don't know. I'm not a politician. You talk about sunset provisions and stuff like this and everything. This is the opportunity. This is not going to cost you $78 million, man. You know, it's been 5 years. 5 años. ¿Cuánto na tao man matay paradzo? Distiadzo na tempo. ¿Cuánto? Where are these folks 5 years ago to testify and say exactly what they said here? No, it's not their fault. I'm not saying that, where were you? Why weren't you there? No, it's not. That's not what I'm trying to say. This is collectively, we're supposed to get together and make this thing work. This is the opportunity. This is not going to cost as much as a $2 million laboratory or whatever that's needed. Educate the people, tell them how great it's going to be, and let it work. Hey, you know, life is not only for the healthy. You know, we're talking about medicinal marijuana. We're going to go a little bit further than that. There's a totally new thing that we have to take care of, and it's up to you folks. Been 5 years, man. I was here 5 years ago. I had tears in my eyes. You know, and even up to now, people are still asking me, when's it going to happen? We talk about black market. It's out there. What are you going to do? How are we going to how are we going to enforce that? It's out there already. Nobody's going to fool me. People are doing it. Now's the opportunity to do it. What else do we have? What else do we have? Other than close the door, go behind that door, and try and figure this one out. From what everybody that was sitting on this table is suggesting, which is a great thing. Do we have the time? How many people have passed on without alleviating that pain that they could have been alleviated with, man? You know, even for only 5 minutes. That's precious, wouldn't it be? But that would be up to you. I just hate to think that because of the complications that may arise from having home cultivation being legal here in Guam and fully enforce it with what we have, that's a lapi to do anything else. And I'd like to find out who disagrees with that and let us know and come up here and tell us where we're going to get that money to do all this stuff. I mean, there's nothing up there. You guys said that. I read a little bit up on the budget. Tinahong, there's no money. Now's the opportunity to do it. And it's prudent of you guys to do that. And it's your obligation. There's nobody else's. You are supposed to please us, not the other way around. It's an opportunity, man. And if you guys don't want to do that, then let's find something else. But do we have to wait another 4 years for another gubernatorial race? Because that's the only time a referendum could come out where the people of Guam could actually vote for it. Or not. Not Maloney. It's a shame. This is not the same group of people that I sat in front of 5 years ago to talk this way. New breed. I'm the oldest guy in here, man. You know? I saw what home cultivation could do. I saw medicinal marijuana. Prolong that life, 5 years, 5 minutes, doesn't matter. It's a moral obligation. We sit around and we talk about there's no money for this, there's no money for that. You know, sometimes to the point where, geez, what are you guys doing here? You know, special session, talk about the budget, approve, then change our minds and stuff like that. What is that? You know, yeah, there are more important things. Life is not only for the healthy. You know, it's a cycle of life, man. You come out of your mom, and then you go through your life, and you're a teenager, you get old, and then you die. And listen carefully and look at that very, very carefully, because that kind of cycle is beginning to change, in which you don't have to be old to die. Things are changing. It's up to us to fight that. This is the opportunity, and this is the only way that I see that it could happen very, very quickly. Not 2 years from now, not until we find a guy that wants to pay to build a laboratory, not until those 2 other bills are passed, so that we all collectively go in there and say, yeah, it's going to happen. Make it happen. You guys are empowered to do that. You guys are the lawmakers. You could virtually do whatever you want to do within the confines of that law in which you guys created, right? So let's do it. I don't know, and as far as it should have been done, you know, little kid was riding his bicycle out there on the road, traffic, and he got hit by that car. You know what did they do? They went over and said, it's all your fault. It's because you were riding on that road. Nobody decided to call 911. It's a ridiculous analogy, but stuff like that. We'll start pointing fingers as to why we are here today. I don't know. Why are we here today? 5 years, dude. When is it going to happen? Now's the opportunity to do that. You know, I'm just an average citizen, man. I haven't read any of the bills here. Those other 2 that you're proposing there, Mr. Chairman. I didn't do that, but I know that it's supposed to enhance what Senator Munya stuck in there. But it's just frustrating. It's 5 years. 5 years. You know, and it's like I said, it's not the same people, but it's the same body. You guys, this is your obligation to make this thing work. And I don't care whether in the very, very beginning we're talking about, oh yeah, how great it's going to be. Mangine, where is it? Where? Why are we waiting this long? That's all that I have to say. It's just that I just can't believe it. 5 years, and we're not doing anything about it. You guys are empowered to do that, so do the math. Why not? Thank you.
Sejus Masi, Mr. Concepcion, thank you very much. We have Mr. Fest, but those of you who testified, if you can please stay, there may be some questions for you, but we'll go ahead and... Mr. Fest, go ahead and begin. If there's anything you want, you can give it to them. Thank you.
Good evening, Senators. Senator Espeldon, Senator Rodriguez, Senator Esteves, Senator Munoz, Senator Salahi. I'm glad to see we have 2 attorneys on the bench tonight. Are you still a practicing attorney? Senator Esteves?
Sir, can you just please go ahead and proceed, sir?
I'm trying.
Okay.
Bill 302-34, testimony by August Best. I request that this bill have more than one hearing. Senators, please do not attempt to fix that which is not broken. As usually, you're going to need a grain of salt for my testimony. Senator Munoz, you're going to need the whole salt shaker. Patient cultivation already exists in Public Law 32-237 and Public Law 33-220. We do not need a bill that will set inadequate plant allowances, conditions to exclude renters, allow unwarranted searches, and sunset provisions to end home cultivation without any regard to consistent availability, quality, variety, or product pricing. The only permit needed now is a doctor's recommendation. This bill will damage and end what we already have in laws. Keep the Department of Health out of it altogether. They will want $1 million and take a year or more to think about it. Department of Health is where medical cannabis goes to die, or at least induced into a coma. I had a discussion recently, partially about this bill, with Acting Director Casil the day I submitted my doctor's recommendation. He stated there would be a very lengthy process for very lengthy rules for home cultivation, but again, the Department of Health does not have funding, staff, equipment, or expertise for medical cannabis. End quote. Acting Director Casil also stated and tried to convince me that Bill 21034 was entirely the work product of Senator Rodriguez's office, and Department of Health had nothing to do with its composition. This should shed some light on the integrity of the Department of Health, and at least where medical cannabis is concerned. We just need a resolution to recognize what we already have, what the people voted for, what was passed into law. Links to Guam Public Laws 32-237 and 33-220 so you can actually read them. And please do. I have links here. Points of interest. The definition of medical use that includes cultivation for the benefit of a qualified patient and exempts in subsections 122404, that's in the first law, and 122504, that's in the second law, that exempts from arrest, prosecution, penalty in any manner for such medical use of a qualified patient. On the 2014 ballot that I tried to give a couple copies out, I didn't think there would be that many senators here, so I tried to give out 2 copies and was rudely interrupted. On that ballot, 19,692 people voted in favor of. It stated, and I have it underlined on that ballot, medical use. It's a legal term, and was defined in Bill 215-32 that we voted for. It's now Public Law 32-237. Includes cultivation for qualified patients and are exempt from arrest, prosecution, or penalty in any manner for such medical use. 214 ballot sample is provided. Ignorance of these laws renders them useless. To deny what is written in these laws is intellectual ineptitude, or dishonesty, or cowardice, all of which are unacceptable and great disservice to the patients. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Read with open eyes and an alert, engaged mind. A public hearing YouTube link and written testimony and very detailed history and explanation of home cultivation and acquisition under Guam Public Law 32-237 and 33-220 medical use is provided. I have the link to the December 18th hearing where I gave like a 20-minute dissertation. Whether it be home cultivation or a commercial operation, 50 square feet of cannabis space per patient is the bare minimum, reasonably necessary to ensure the uninterrupted availability of cannabis as stated as the definitions of adequate supply and allowable amount in our public laws 32-237 and 33-220. 72 square feet would be the preferred or optimum efficient effectiveness. I know this from personal experience. However, I provided reference from Biotech Analysis Corporation and Carnegie Mellon University study for estimating adequate square footage for production. This study was compiled from experienced commercial cultivators under optimum conditions. Edibles, concentrates, and oils will require much more than 72 square feet of cannabis space per patient. 100 square feet or a 10 by 10 area of total cannabis space should be the standard without a separate permit, as was in Del Norte County, California, prior to my moving to Guam. I got a link to the Biotech Analysis study. Forget plant number allowances. This is not a qualitative nor quantitative unit of measure. There are too many variables with breeds, cultivation methods and conditions, knowledge, experience, expertise, abilities, or lack thereof. Also, not to overlook the 1-to-1 ratio of unusable males to medicine-producing females. Only the female plant produces the bud. The bud's the only part that's used for medicine. I challenged the good senator to introduce this bill when we had a meeting. I said, go try, go ahead, go try to grow some cannabis and see how much 3 mature, and it doesn't even say females. Your bill only says mature. Well, we got 3 mature males. Does that count too? Shouldn't. Should be females. This Bill 302-34 suggests only 3 mature and 6 juvenile plants. On what planet will that keep anyone supplied with usable cannabis? This is only enough to aggravate anyone to realize and say, why bother? The Department of Health Form 2E, that I also try to hand out, which you can't get, I had to make them make it up because it was something that they forgot, is for an increased allowable amount. I inserted for the doctor's request a legal request. I will read it for you. At the patient's request, I support to recommend the patient be allowed to possess as stated and defined in Public Law 32-237 as being adequate, and as defined in Public Law 34-80 as being allowable, both being consistent with the Department of Health first and second draft rules, and both being reasonably necessary to ensure the uninterrupted availability of cannabis and to exercise fully the exemptions and protections granted under Public Law 32-237 and Public Law 33-220, and where Public Law 34-80 is pursuant to, for the medical use of cannabis, as these terms are stated and defined in all the same statutes. The legitimate reason for the request being the lack of safe access to any consistent, safe supply of quality, affordable cannabis derived from an interstate source. An adequate supply, as stated in Public Law 32-237, is a 3-month supply. That term is not in the other laws. This equates to 1 pound of bud. You're not going to get there with this Bill 302-34. Neither will anyone achieve with this bill what is stated as the allowable amount in Public Law 33-220, which that term is not in the first law, as 2.5 ounces, and now with the new set of rules, it's every 2 weeks. So if you take 2.5 ounces divided by their grams, divide that by 14, or times it for grams, you divide that by 14 days, you come up with 5 grams a day. You times that by 90 for your 90-day supply. You're at a pound of bud. You're not going to get there with this bill. You're not going to get a pound of bud. You're not going to get 2.5 ounces every 2 weeks. In other words, this Bill 302-34 is useless and counterproductive to ensuring the uninterrupted supply of cannabis as the stated mission of both current public laws, but also goes against the best interest of the patients with its arbitrary exclusions involving the dysfunctional Department of Health, unwarranted searches, sunset provision without any regard to consistent availability, quality, variety, or product pricing. What if you can't afford at $1 million for a lab and $50,000 for a garden, another $20,000 in fees for a dispensary? What's going to be a gram at the counter? And then you want to end home cultivation, and what are you going to pay? $100 a gram? $200 a gram? Sorry, ain't going to happen, folks. Senators, please discard this bill in all its conceived components and just recognize and go with what we voted for and already have passed and exists in Public Laws 32-237 and 33-220. That ballot sample, that's the birth certificate. The NRF spelled on says we shouldn't be messing with changing the history of birth certificates. On one of my smoke breaks, I ran into Speaker Cruz, and I reminded him that he has jurisdiction over the Governor Calvo's Bill 8-34 and to please dust it off, because, as I've said before, the only way you're going to get this medicine in the hands of the patient, as Mr. Parkinson's, kind of says, but he's got it differently than I see it. I think we need home cultivation first and foremost as a stopgap measure, but also if the patient can't afford what's ever going to come down the road, either adult use market or medical market, at least they can do something. And that's it for that bill. And where's my...
Mr. Fess, we're going to have to take a short recess. They're going to have to reconfigure. We've been on now for 3 hours, so we'll take a 5-minute recess.
All right, I'll be